Radiant heat system, you're not actually heating the air in the space, you're heating the objects in the space, so then you end up having the heat actually delivered to the place where it's needed rather than trying to get that air to go where it needs to go.
SupplyWise podcast.
Hello and welcome to SupplyWise, the one and why for residential, commercial, and industrial building supply. I'm your host, Andrew Stevens of Mountain Land Supply, and today we're talking with Jared Kennard, a commercial sales manager with Intermountain Sales. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back again. We talked about PEX earlier, so we're going to talk about a PEX adjacent product. I guess. Radiant heating systems. We've talked about this previously on the podcast, but we wanted to bring you in to talk about maybe a Viga specific product. But just to kind of as a recap, radiant heat systems use water rather than air to heat your driveway for snow melt or your house.
Correct. Yeah, it's usually typically paired with a boiler as opposed to a furnace. Oftentimes, if you're heating your house, you're using a furnace and pushing hot air through your house, whereas in a radiant heat or a hydronic system, you're using a boiler and you're pushing that heat out through pipes. And you can, roughly in rough numbers, you can transfer the same amount of heat in a 3/4 inch piece of pipe with hydronics that you'd transfer in a 18 by 18 duct. So It ends up being substantially more efficient to try and move heat that way than it does through air.
Right, and ultimately it leads to a much more even heating system rather than having maybe a hot spot or a cold spot. Maybe you're under a vent, you're getting blasted by it, or you have to sit in a certain spot in your house.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably experienced being in a certain spot in their house and it being a little bit cold, even though the thermostat on the wall says 72 or 73. Whereas in a radiant heat system, you're not actually heating the air in the space, you're heating the objects in the space. So then you end up having the heat actually delivered to the place where it's needed rather than trying to get that air to go where it needs to go.
It also just feels awesome on your feet when you have that.
It feels awesome on your feet.
It's awesome. The house that I'm living in right now, we've got it's 2-story thermostat on the main floor, but there's almost no airflow to the top floor. We have a narrow staircase that goes up. That's about all the heat. So in the wintertime, we turn on the thermostat, heat's supposed to rise, but when there's very limited airflow, it doesn't really. So it gets nice and warm downstairs. We go up to go to bed and it's freezing cold. So with this radiant heat system, make sure that it's nice and even throughout.
Right.
And with Viga products, the couplings have the fail-safe that we've talked about in the past.
If you do need to make a fitting with a Viga system, if you're using the PEX press system from Viga, it's similar to their Pro Press system, which a lot of contractors I'm sure are already familiar with what that is. Just an easier way to make a copper connection. But in those Pro Press fittings, they've got a leak channel, and if the fitting isn't actually made right, it'll weep, and so they'll know immediately that there's a leak there. And they've got that same technology in their PEX press. So if that fitting isn't made correctly and they put it under test, as they should before they do any sealing up of wall cavities or anything, it'll weep a bit and they'll know that they're losing pressure in their system, so they don't actually end up doing the whole sheetrocking, painting the whole bit, and then they have a fitting blow off behind a wall somewhere and end up
having to tear out your driveway or something.
Driveway because there's a leak out there or something. So
maybe causing a sinkhole. That would be
right.
That's the ultimate fear for a homeowner, right? Is you install something like this, but with Viga products, that those couplings are going to be nice and secure. It's not going to go in there. So one of the main drawbacks of radiant heat systems is the initial price point, usually very high for something like that. There are cost-saving measures with the PEX system. It's cheaper than copper, so that way that reduces a little bit. But ultimately, it's a long-term investment.
Correct. Yeah, and really it is about comfort, right? I mean, like we were talking a minute ago, it's if you're trying to heat the space with air, you're going to have uneven spots of heat, whereas with radiant or hydronic systems, generally speaking, you're going to be heating the objects if you're doing in-floor heat kind of a thing. So and then it's it's generally running off of a pretty efficient equipment anyway. So the equipment itself tends to be a little bit more efficient, and the heat delivery system tends to be a little bit more efficient. So over time, it'll probably end up saving you money, but certainly the biggest bang for your buck is going to be the comfort factor that you're going to get out of this, as opposed to what you'd get out of a different system.
Yeah, it's all about comfort and control. Like we said, you have the entire place heated to your liking,
right?
And so that way you're not, you don't have to curl up on the couch with a blanket because it doesn't work on
Absolutely.
that one spot on the couch. So thanks for coming in and chatting with us about this.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you having you on. You can find these products at mountainlandsupply.com or with your Mountain Land rep. You can find this podcast at mountainlandsupply.com/SupplyWise, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Make sure you tune in each week to find out more about the products and services that make you SupplyWise.
Thanks, guys.